Yeah, NBA Straya, how are you going? Hang out, I hope you're all right. Why is that, Jim? Well, I hope you're going all right because it's hump day. That's right, hump day, Wednesday, February 19, all day. And you know what time it is? It's Hammer time. You better believe it. That's right. Today's show is literally just me having a chat with Hammer. It's awesome. It's a great time. It's a very wide-ranging, far-reaching, fun chat. As we sort of hit on, it's been 700 plus episodes since we last had him on, which is insane to think about that I've done 700 episodes since then. But either way, I'm your host, Jaymz Clements. You can see me on AFL Today, which is now back and flying. We're doing season over-unders this week, which has been absolutely awesome. What else am I on? NFL Straya. Yes, we found Gaz. He is alive. So that show will be back very, very soon. But this is episode 1209. It's literally just myself and Hammer having an old chinwag about Kevin Garnett, about All-Star Weekend, about NBL Finals, about the NBL MVP, about his career, obviously, in the NBA. We've sort of hit on it before, but this is a really fun one. Then we get into some NBL title picks and the really fun stuff. Kyrie Irving is a boomer. Ben Simmons' future. It's very, very fun. So, strap in. Let's get into it. Episode 1209 of NBA Straya with Shane the Hammer Heel. Let's go! All right, now we welcome on a very special guest. He is now a recurring guest. Which means that I'm pretty sure anytime I ask him, he has to come back on. That's how these things work, I'm pretty sure. But he is the Hammer, the Yahoo from the Yarra Junction. It is the great Shane the Hammer Heel, who just recently popped up in the news out of nowhere because of one Kevin Garnett. Hammer, you were last on this show, episode 500. We are now 1,200 shows in to NBA Straya. Welcome back.
Oh, that was an intro, mate. I'm not sure I've had an intro like that before, introduced from Yarra Junction, but I like it. Winding back the clock, and it was nice to get a little bit of love. Got stroked by the great KG, and good memories playing with the big fella.
Was that a bit that's obviously got to be a surprise to you as well? He just gives you some massive props out of absolutely nowhere. He's asked about who was the best international player you played with, and he's wound the clock back to 1997. You're sitting at home back in Australia going, "Oh, geez, thanks, man." He was so effusive in his praise for you as well. It was crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess it was so different back then. You look at the NBA. It was all an inside game. There wasn't that many people taking threes. And I feel like Drewy and I had to break the mold a little bit, even, in the NBL and playing for Australia. I took over from Phil Smythe. He's coming down the court and he's just organising and, pointing and assists and, such a great player of our game. But, I'm coming down shooting threes on the fast break. It was a different mentality that I guess we played with, and then taking that to the NBA. There still wasn't a lot of players that shot a lot of threes. So it was nice to be recognised that we probably were doing that before the current trend of the way the game's played.
Well, it was incredible. He literally was he was like Steph Curry before Steph Curry. And I'm like, I've been saying that for years. Let's go. This is awesome. Finally, KG's on side as well. But my favourite part of it was that he's like, Shane Hill would say, "Hey, mate, I don't know what you said, mate, but take this 3-ball with you, mate." As KG's putting on an Aussie accent. Did you leave that much of an imprint on him, Shane?
They used to give me shit all the time. They'd mock me. We'd have a play 352 twist, and then you'd hear 3 or 4 people, 352 twist, 352 twist. They'd all try and do the Aussie accent. So it was pretty unique. You got to remember back in the day, in the mid-90s, I was there in 96, there wasn't that many foreigners that were playing in the NBA. The Americans only thought the game was played in America. They didn't really think anyone could do it well outside of America. And then, thankfully over, the last 30 years, now we're seeing so many people, particularly Aussies that are playing there, but people from Europe and everything else. And they're respected. They're probably, when you look down the best players in the NBA right now, they're all foreigners, which would absolutely piss off the Americans. There's no doubt about it. That's why I hope they get to a non-American versus American All-Star game because, and they probably won't do it because they won't want to be embarrassed.
That's it. I think that's one of the fixes that we've also been talking about for the last week since the All-Star break is like, I mean, it's such a schmozzle at the moment. Like they've tried this sort of, 4-team tournament with the Rising Stars and then the All-Stars broken up into another 3 teams and you're like, you're trying too hard. Like the answer is right there. But I don't feel like the Americans are like really wanting their ego bruised to have their ass kicked by like Jokic and Giannis and Luka and stuff in front of everybody, right? Like they'll be just like, no, I don't want any bar of this.
And Shea,
True.
like you look at the talent, probably the top 5 players in the world right now are all non-Americans. So whilst they want to be a global game, they've still got the egos to say it's an American game. And I think it'd be pretty one-sided. I really do, and I'd love them to do it. I think it would help basketball all around the world because I know how they feel in America about the Americans. they would absolutely love it after playing 3 years in Greece and Italy. They would love to see America go down, and they call themselves the world champions. From the NBA, and it's all a little bit funny to me.
Yeah, meanwhile, Germany won the last World Cup. It's like, come on, what are we doing here? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, even to cast your mind back, I guess, to that 96, 97, year that you're with the Wolves. I mean, I think we talked about this last time. It's like, it's a remarkable time in the NBA, right? That's the sort of the MJ second three-peat. You're playing with like a rookie, Stephon Marbury. You've got KG in like his second year sort of stuff. Like, even if you look at that that roster, it is remarkable to sort of look at how there aren't any other internationals. Like even like those sort of guys at the end of the bench where you look at all the rosters now, I think we're traveling like 40%. You can have like just, internationals up and down all these NBA rosters. And it's essentially like a bunch of vets, a bunch of young dudes, and you and Stjoko Vrankovic. And like, that's about it, right?
Yeah, it was a funny year because, Stephon Marbury was a wild teenager, like unbelievably talented. But once they signed me on a 3-year deal, they drafted him, or the other way around, they drafted him, signed me, then they brought in Terry Porter because they thought they couldn't trust Steph, as talented as he is, and he needed to learn the way. Couldn't really trust an Aussie that was 26 and hadn't played in the NBA. They don't really trust internationals anyway. So they brought in Terry Porter, which was frustrating for me because I mean, in the first year, I didn't get the same opportunities that I believed that I was going to get. And, I think we spoke about it last time. In my second year, I started the first 5 games of the exhibition series and then blew my calf out and was out for 17 weeks or something. And I don't live with too many regrets, but that's probably one of them, that just not patient enough to be able to go, yep, I've still got 2 years left on my deal. But, when you got 2 kids under 2 and you're living in minus 30 degrees and, it was a massive setback for me and one that I wish I had just stuck it out rather than sort of demanding to go home.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones where I think we've had Chris Anstey on the show a bunch as well. Like he was almost in a very sort of similar situation where he gets, drafted and traded and it's like Dallas and you've got this cultural sort of change that you're not used to and no one's really sort of done it before. Like, you and Drew had sort of been through it a little bit and then Chris is sort of over there. Like Luke is obviously over there, but with Longley, I mean, being at the sort of epicenter of this Bulls second three-peat and stuff like this, you're sort of looking at it going, okay, like he's kind of trailblazing this sort of stuff, but he obviously dealt with a lot of tough stuff as well. And it's just so crazy to look back now, like 30 years on, where you have these like little inroads essentially being made by you guys. And then eventually it means that someone like Bogut can get drafted number 1, Simmons can get drafted number 1. And it just sort of all feeds into like a much more sort of stable situation for Australians. I don't know, like, how do you think like a young player now would sort of be like, there'd almost be no difference, right? Like you look at someone like Dyson Daniels, who sort of takes a little bit of time to sort of get used to his role in New Orleans, but he's like a really high draft pick. Josh Giddey, the same sort of thing. They're sort of like working their way into their careers, which I don't think you guys kind of maybe got enough of a chance.
Yeah, a little bit like that, but I think it was my fault. It wasn't the club. The clubs did everything they did to try and convince me to say, "What are you talking about, mate? You're going to be out 4 months. So what? You come back. You're still getting paid, and you'll be right." But I was so passionate about doing well that year. I'd sat the first year. I led the summer league in assists. Went to Utah. Had a great summer league. I had a great preseason. So I was so frustrated and so down. I really needed someone just to slap me in the head and go, mate, wake up to yourself. And, I admire somebody like Paddy that probably wasn't getting the same opportunities as me early, but he was waving the towel and he was happy just to be part of the NBA and sit there for years before he got his opportunity. And I felt like had I done that, my second and third years would have been really big for me. And I guess that's why the frustration and probably the sign of immaturity and the fact that I just wanted to make things happen right then. We weren't used to it. So I think what you're saying is right. I think the fact that these young kids coming through now, I only look at Landale and lack of opportunities, but when he does get opportunities, how you could see that he could be a vital piece of a good team. But they're used to being able to deal with it, that people put their arm around them and give them a whole lot of history about just waiting your time, doing your work. And when you get that chance, you sign a big contract. And I felt like I would have been no different had I handled it differently.
Yeah, I think it's like, from a fan's perspective, back over here, growing up in the 90s, you're like, I still remember going, why is Andrew Gay's not in the NBA? And then Shane Heal finally gets there and it's like, oh, look, this is all happening. And then sort of like, it's not so much it fizzled out, but it's just like, yeah, the lack of opportunities and that sort of then pipeline really sort of stymied it all. But I mean, outside of this, like the rest of those, the Timberwolves stuff, it still blows my mind that KG is just like, this was my guy. He's been on like title teams on the Boston Celtics. And it was like, he was on the Brooklyn Nets team that I watched extremely closely in like the 2014-15. I'm like, yo, he thinks that you're better, Shane, than Mirza Teletovic. Like, this is great. Andre Kirilenko, to be honest, like he was on those Nets teams as well later on in KG's career. KG might have just forgotten them, but I feel like you made that much of an impression that he's like, no, Hammer's the best.
I sometimes like you get really humbled because, KG was a good teammate and I got along really well with him and, he's a superstar. But, over the last couple of years, like Shaq has been unbelievably complimentary to me when he came out and he did his whole points bet tour and interviews. People are sending me interviews of what he's saying about little Shane and this. And then Charles Barkley's sort of been the same. So the international love has sort of been off the charts a little bit, and you sort of pinch yourself because it makes the headlines and then it gets on all the social media and, you sort of, have to, pinch yourself a little bit and say, oh, that's pretty cool that these guys with everything they've done, they actually still remember who I am, let alone put me in the sort of class that they have. But it also then makes me feel like, what could have been at the same time. Had things been a little bit different and the decisions had been different, but it is what it is. And I was very lucky to get the opportunities and to be able to play well against dream teams and at Olympics and World Cups as well.
I mean, this is kind of it. All you had to do was kind of try to start fights with a bunch of Americans and you just sort of imprinted on them for life. It's great.
Well, I did hit 8 threes. Like it was just that as well, but but who's counting?
I mean, if you want to count, my favorite thing is still the game that you had against the Seattle Supersonics. So my beloved Seattle Supersonics, I grew up a Sonics fan. On NBA Straya, if you're watching on the old YouTube here, I literally have the old Key Arena behind me in the background. And I think it was your best game for the Wolves, was like dropping 5 threes on the Sonics in like no time in like a fourth quarter, right? Like in November 96.
Well, it was funny because, I'd had hardly any minutes prior to that. The game before that Seattle game, we played in Washington and we were getting blown out and he put the bench in, Flip put the bench in fourth quarter and we made a run. And I think I had 11 points in the last quarter. And I was like, yep, here we go. The next game still hadn't got on 3/4 time. I think he might have put me on like 15 seconds before the end of third quarter. And then I thought, oh yeah, I'm off again. And then he goes, no, you're on. So I'm like, okay. And then I made my first and made my second. Then we made a run and we got back and I had 5 threes in that quarter. And it was a club record at that stage in a quarter. And I remember calling mates back home because obviously the games weren't shown like they are now where you can just pick and choose what games. I had mates that were going to the casino to watch a game that was nationally televised. And the very next game, I had a group of mates that did exactly that. They went to the casino where it was being beamed. Yep, here you go. He's had 11. He's had 15 and a quarter. This is the chance. I got 16 seconds in the next game, and then I didn't get on for like 5 games or something after that. So it becomes frustrating when you know what you can do and you're waiting for those opportunities, but they think differently in the NBA. It's all about the long game. They don't get carried away with just one game here and there. And again, frustrating, very new for me, but nice to have had the opportunity to at least show that.
Well, it also gave us one of the great YouTube clips of all time with "Praise the Lord, for I am healed. Are you healed?" And it's just like you dropping bombs left, right, and centre. It's one of the great clips in Australian basketball history, if you ask me. So we've sort of hit on the All-Star weekend, and like we were chatting just before, and like you've just like gone, no, I don't care about the game. And I think everybody sort of hit this sort of point as well. We threw in a bunch of fixes, I think, in our last show. So it's like essentially getting like 24 former All-Stars to pick their representative to play for them, bit of pride. Maybe a one-on-one tournament in place of the game. Like, let's just go through, knock out, let's go. How do you feel like, back in the olden days, you would have gone at something like this, like an all-star game, all-star tournament, one-on-one? I mean, from a player's perspective, like how would you have rated yourself up against some of the other sort of players at the time?
In the NBA?
Yeah, have a crack. Let's
go.
Oh,
jeez. Yeah, I mean, mate, the amount of talent in the NBA, physical talent of how they were was tough. Like you had to make shots because if you didn't make shots in a one-on-one, they are so good and so talented and so athletic and strong and next level. So we used to do it a little bit at training where they'd just match everybody up on a basket, and then if you got scored on, you'd move to the next basket, and you just keep going around in a circle. So you get an opportunity to play against those guys. But, mate, I'm not sure what the fix is because the players just look at it differently. They don't have the Jordans and Kobe's and these guys that are just ruthless to be able to compete. They run it up and down and shooting shots and giggling and stuff like that. That's why I checked out 10 years ago because I feel like it's just a waste of time. I think the only way to do it is, like we said before, is the international versus the Americans. And then I think when you do add, I know the women's league, the 3-on-3, they just added a one-on-one. And I think that is something that would be so much better than a skills challenge or anything like that, because that's when you have to have some pride. Like if you play one-on-one and you just get your ass wiped, then that's on you. Yeah. So I think that's when the guys would actually jump in and actually compete and go, no, I'm better than you. So I'm not sure whether the players would go for it. I hope they do because it would be intriguing. That's one that I would definitely be locked in for, to be able to watch that talent go head to head and see guys really playing with some pride again.
I love it. I just think the idea of like, Wemby versus like Jokic and stuff like this would just bring the house down. Like, let's just go. Like, it doesn't matter if it's bigs versus smalls, smalls versus bigs, bigs versus bigs. I'd be all over it. I think this would be awesome. I mean, moving on to a bit of NBL. I mean, with the All-Star stuff sort of popping off this week for the NBA, it always, brings up should the NBL have an All-Star sort of situation? It's like the sort of ongoing conversations. What do you think about NBL All-Star approaches? Like, it's always going to be a bit tricky, I think, especially with the scheduling that we have. And like, we always have like these FIBA breaks. And I'm like, dude, FIBA break, I don't care. Come on, let's get an NBL All-Star game in here or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the NBL just tries to mimic everything that's going on in the NBA, everything. And, if an all-star game happened and our players treated it the same way as the NBA all-star that everyone's lost interest in, I'm not sure that there's a point to it.
Yeah.
I know one year we did have Americans versus Australians, and we used that to be able to get ready, for a World Cup or an Olympics or something like that. That was a lot of fun. And got people sort of intrigued. The Americans obviously wanted to beat the Australians. The Aussies were like, no way, we're not losing to the Americans. So I think that potentially could work when you talk about one-on-one. I think that would work within that sort of weekend if they're going to do it. But I think if they're just going to mimic what's happening in the NBA, that would be a mistake.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I mean, speaking of the NBL as well, I mean, how did you find, so the awards happened last week. We've got Bryce as the MVP. I mean, did you sort of come out of this season feeling like we've got the the idea of the awards right? So Bryce ahead of KD. Like, did you feel like that was all good and stuff like that?
Yeah, Bryce Cotton is incredible. Like he is a freak. Yeah, I mean, you watch him play and you watch him move without the ball and how they deny him. And there's so many systems in place to be able to stop him, and the amount of difficult shots that he hits. Um, he is the best import of all time. I played with Leroy Loggins, and I love Leroy and his longevity, and what Leroy did is incredible. But there's no recency bias about what Bryce Cotton's done. He is a freak. He could be making 5 times the money, in Europe. We'll be lucky if we're able to keep him. I really like Davis. I jumped on my high horse early days when people started questioning him and saying, he can't play at this level, because you could see it early days. He's just got a poise about him. He's very different to Bryce, but a great player in his own ways. He's got this poise where he can create. He makes good decisions. He can shoot the three ball. He's really shifty at getting to the basket. He gets to the free throw line, and he's young. He's only going to continue to get better. I hope that somebody picks him up here in Australia, because I think he's going to be highlights for years to come if he stays.
Yeah, he's like, seeing him in person. Like, obviously, their last 2 games essentially came against the Phoenix down here in Melbourne, and like I was at both those games, and like just watching him operate, like he gets to his spots so easily, and you're like, this is just versus like at his size with that speed, like it's just what he can do just blew me away. And like you watch Bryce for years and years and years, and like you just sort of see professional scorer, just absolute. But KD, I was just amazed by his playmaking ability, just how he got to his spots and just how he executed. It was really, really cool. So it's a great shout. I
Very,
mean,
very different, aren't they? They're very different, but amazing in their own ways. But you imagine what KD will be doing when he's Bryce's age.
yep.
As an all-round point guard. Bryce is, a scoring shooting guard. That's what he does. He's not a point guard, but he's one of the best that we've ever seen do it. And he deserves his flowers, Bryce. And a lot of people sort of won't say that he's the best import, but I think it's time to be able to start it now.
Yeah. I mean, so you're Sydney Kings. I mean, we're going to say why not? You want a title with them? We'll say that. So they get knocked out. We've got 4 teams left. We've got Phoenix, Illawarra, and United Perth. I mean, do you feel like these are the 4 best remaining teams from the year? Like, how did you sort of see the final series shake out?
Well, I mean, the Kings had, probably the most talent as any team in the league, but they capitulated, and they showed signs of that all year. And then when you listen to Brian in the press conference talk about, the team that he had, and to me, I felt like that was a bit of a slap at Chris Pongrass, because Chris Pongrass has always been the one that when the team wins, they're like, oh, he's the guru. He put these teams together. Well, they went after all of these players and it didn't mesh.
Yeah.
They had to pay for bull qual. They had to beat other teams, and Isaiah Liafa and Adams and Oliver and these guys. They specifically went after them to have the most talent. They were the title favourites. So, it was a disaster for the Sydney Kings this year. But I think the 4 best teams have made it. I love the way the Illawarra Hawks play. I mean, what Justin Tatum has done is really incredible. Like he took over a team that was so bad for a season and a half, and with no changes, he was able to turn them into a team that made the playoffs, and then added another piece this year, or a couple of pieces, and they're so fun to watch. They're so balanced. They play defense. They put points on the board. They play as a team. You can see that he's got a great rapport with his team, but he's got a really good balance. You know that he's going to keep them in line at the same time. I'd love to see the Illawarra Hawks win it. I think they can. I think that they're going to blow out Southeast Melbourne, unfortunately, for you and your son on Sunday having to go watch them. But, they've done well in their own right to be able to turn their season around to get to the level that they're at. I think the other game's intriguing. I know that Melbourne United have dominated against Perth all season. But I look back and noticed that Bryce didn't play in one of those games. Doolittle didn't play in one of those games. And I think Perth are a different team right now. Perth are playing with a whole lot of confidence and momentum. And whenever you take momentum into the finals, you become pretty dangerous. So I think that's going to be intriguing. You probably still have to favour Melbourne United for the defensive aspects of what they bring to the table and some of their veterans. But I think that's going to be a really good series.
Yeah, I think the Hawks all season have sort of just been like everyone slowly realized, oh my God, like it doesn't sort of matter who they're putting out there. Like Cal, Harvey, Hickey, it sort of doesn't matter. Like their backcourt is always sort of, I don't know, in control of the game. It never feels like it sort of gets out of hand with that team. That's so weird to sort of watch across an entire season of the NBL and just sort of see how Tatum has sort of really just imprinted himself on that team, given them that confidence, and they've never looked back. It's been awesome. So, yeah, I'm just excited to see them, to be honest. Like the kid, look, I'm a Carlton supporter. My 6-year-old is a Carlton supporter. We are used to disappointment. So he better get used to it with basketball as well very quickly. So I think he'll sort of go into that game going, Dad, why did they lose? And I'm like, well, this is what happens.
Now, the fans should be excited, for what Southeast Melbourne have done and having a new coach there on long term. He's going to have an opportunity now that he knows the league to be able to put his fingerprints over what he thinks he needs to go to the next level. No doubt he'll make some changes. I would imagine they're going to make some really critical decisions that's going to put them, right up there challenging next year. No doubt about that.
It was also awesome to see that the report finally came out that Slam and Sam McKinnon lit a fire under them at halftime of that game on the weekend. And I love Sam McKinnon more than just about anybody. So that was awesome to see that Slam and Sam still got it.
Going old school, winding back the clock. He might have given him one of Barry Barnes's famous sprays or something like that, replicated, one of those with the veins sort of popping out and all the rest of it. So, good on him. I'm glad they got the result. I was happy to see them win.
Yep.
Nothing against Adelaide, but, they've been so up and down and, there's stages where you really like what they do and then that they're, a minute away from imploding with some of the characters they've got. So I was happy to see Southeast Melbourne get that at home and, I think it's a great first step for them and their coach.
Yeah, I mean, so someone like DJ who has a game like that where he has, 3 points, can't hit a shot. Like the flip side, like Sobey had almost the exact same game, right? Like Sobey couldn't score in this game either. Like, how do you bounce back if you're someone like DJ, where you have that game, your sort of season ends on that disappointing sort of note? Like, do you think there's how much harder do you have to work? Like, do you go into next season sort of like with a fire lit under your ass? What do you reckon?
DJ's got the ability to have a short memory, I reckon. Like, he can have a game where he doesn't get into it, and some of it was his fault as a shooter, and then some of it was probably their system. I think he'd be talking to management about the system and the personnel that they had in there, how he could be utilised a little bit better and opportunities, because he's not somebody that necessarily just has to break people down himself. Davis has got the ball a lot. He can pick and choose when he's going to go and get shots. If he hasn't had a shot for 3 minutes, he'll go and fabricate something. Much more difficult for DJ. So you've got to be able to sprinkle plays in to make sure you get him on some staggers or some movement or whatever else, because he's not necessarily going to break you down and just score on your eye. If he does, then people are saying, well, that's a bad shot. Look what he's doing. He's shooting from too far out. So you need to find a way to get him some easy ones, which I think he's capable of being able to do as well. So there's no doubt the Adelaide management are going to have to try and balance what they put together for next year.
Yeah, it was just a weird game. I feel like, Isaac Humphries probably wasn't used enough against that sort of smaller Phoenix team. Geordie Hunter on the flip side hadn't been played enough in that game either, and it felt like he was doing really well early on. It was just a strange game, obviously, all up, which is why it was such a weird schmozzle early on, and then turns into this absolute rip snorer in the back half. It was bizarre. But anyway, I mean, last little bit of coaching stuff in NBL. I mean, Brisbane, Justin Schuler's now gone, one of your former teams as well. One of your mates, former basketball show co-host as well, Derek Rucker. His name keeps popping up. What do you reckon there, Hammer? Can we see Ruck out there in charge of the Bullets?
Yeah, I'm not sure that, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to Derek of late since this news came out, of whether that's something that he would want to do. I mean, he's got a successful business that he runs, coaching all of the kids that is really lucrative. I think he's one of the best analysts in the game. There's not a whole lot of pressure when you're an analyst and you're coaching kids and making a good living. It'll just depend if he wanted to put his hand up and really take that step forward. He's got a great basketball mind. I know he's good friends with Joey Wright, who's doing the same sort of thing, coaching kids now. And I know, there's a whole lot less pressure, and they're probably making more money doing that than coaching professionally.
I like it. I think, and when you say that, there's not as much pressure. I mean, D-Ruck is also currently going back and forth, I think, with Halls and Felix about his punishment for saying that Sydney were going to win it all. And I think he has to walk from Sydney to Perth, you reckon? So I know that having that hang over your head might be a bit of pressure. But last one for you, Hammer. And this is like obviously fairly topical. It's sort of popped off the last couple of days. Kyrie, born in Melbourne, has played and won a gold medal with the USA, hasn't been selected on Team USA the last two Olympics. And now he's put his hand up. He's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind playing for Australia. Gazy came out. I think he's now said that he's on board with it. The Kyrie approach, how do you feel about this? The ideal of Kyrie Irving as a boomer, how does it sit with you?
The game's changed. I mean, there'll be traditionalists that have grown up and said, no, you've got to, live here and play here and contribute here and all the rest of it. And, in our era, that's what we did. I didn't grow up having dreams of playing in the NBA or playing overseas. I just wanted to play for Australia. I did everything I could because I wanted to play for Australia, and I did everything, in that Boomers uniform. But I think the game's changed. Everything's so international now. I think the fact that he was born here, if there's rights for him to be able to do it and he committed to it and he shows passion for wanting to play for Australia. I mean, right now, he's probably shown more commitment to play for Australia than Ben Simmons has. So, I'm all for it. If he wants to do the lead-ups and, there'd be no skimping of saying, well, I'm just going to pick and choose. I'm not coming to camps. I'm not doing this. If he ticked the boxes and he wanted to commit, I think he's a perfect fit for, with Giddy and Dyson and Jock and these guys. Geez, we've got some talent. I mean, and especially, if we got someone like Quinn Snyder that these NBA guys looked up to and listened to and wanted to be coached by, geez, it'd be an exciting time. The future is looking really bright for the Boomers, and I'd actually like to see it.
I love it. I think, and if Kyrie is actually 100% serious and actually can happen, like, there is like no doubt in my mind that Ben is also then like, wait a minute, I'm on the Clippers now. This Olympics is now in LA. I don't have to do anything. This is very easy. I'll just walk over there and boom, I'm a Boomer again. And I think basketball fans in Australia might have a couple of vibes on that. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, Ben's an interesting one. I get frustrated with Ben because you know what he's capable of doing. You know what his upside is. I just don't think he loves the game. I don't think he's passionate about basketball. I think he does it because, he's had an ability to make an enormous amount of money from it. I think that he got burnt in Philly that I think was really unfair. I think he lost his confidence. I think him sitting out a year and demanding trades hurt him. Back injuries in and out. But to me, it was all about passion that he just didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do the grind. Lost his confidence, probably didn't do the work that it takes. Like when you look at his jump shot and see his form on his jump shot, you're like, mate, I could literally change that. Give me 2 weeks of doing 2 hours a day and we could have your jump shot right in the off season. It's not hard, but you got to take three. You got to take 3 steps backwards and to want to do it. You got to commit to it. You got to want to change. That if you roll out year on year, and what makes it worse for Ben is they keep showing those bloody videos of him in the off season shooting threes and that, and his elbows out here, and it's like it's a disaster. It's ugly. It's like, mate, why are we even showing these videos? Because you're never going to shoot a three. You're just not going to do it. Why? Like it's just fodder for everybody to be able to just put the boots in again. Whereas my thing is, mate, build your confidence on your technique. Become an 80% free throw shooter. So I've got 12-year-olds that can shoot 80% from the free throw line. It's all mental and technique. Get your aggression back. You're a great defender. You're a great passer. You're a great rebounder. Play your role. Fall in love with the game again. And I think that's what he'll actually do in Clippers. The thing is, he's going to be motivated because his contract's finished.
Yeah.
So he has to, if he wants to have a role moving forward, he's going to have to play great basketball. And he's capable of doing that. I think he's in a good situation. I think he's going to play the best basketball he's played for 4 years, which isn't hard, but he will. And then someone will go, you know what? Ben's turned the corner again. We're going to sign you to a 3-year deal because you can help us win. And then the challenge will come, do you still have the same passion again when you've already got a guaranteed contract?
Yeah.
And that's how I see Ben. He frustrates me. I'd love to see him succeed. I want to see him succeed. I'd love for him to find the passion to want to play for Australia, because I think he'd help Australia. But does he have the passion to want to do everything that takes to become a boomer once you get there, or are you doing your own thing as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's so related to his situation, right? Like, I think for the Clippers, it's like there's zero pressure. They've got Kawhi, they've got James Harden, they've got Norm Powell. Like, they're fine. Like, they don't need Ben Simmons. And I feel like this is kind of the thing where Philly needed him to be the number one pick, to be, LeBron light. And then Brooklyn, like, he's the centerpiece of the Harden trade to, like, make this all sort of happen and stuff. So the expectations are sort of set, and he's sort of like probably getting up in his own head about this sort of stuff, about what people want from him and what management, coaching, fans probably want from him. He goes to LA and no one cares. Like, it's just like this sort of like, oh, wait, I can just kind of do my thing. And I'm like, people might actually jump on board again. And like, we saw it just before the All-Star break. He played his best game in like ages. And you're like, that was awesome. Just keep doing that. And it's possible that he could. And then the problem is, if like, Miami gives him 3 years, $90 million in the offseason this year or something, and it just like all falls apart again. You're like, oh, great. But to be honest, I just want to see you as his shooting coach. Like, let's just make this happen, Hammer. Come on.
Mate, honestly, it's not hard. It is not. It is not hard to be able to change your shot, but you do have to take steps backwards, which frustrates some people, because not everyone's prepared to commit to actually start again. You've got one hand under here, and then it's only one hand shooting, and you're building to create new habits. So it's not difficult. It won't happen. I think he'll still be shooting the same for the rest of his career, unfortunately. But as much as I've sort of called him out on my views of what I just spoke about before, I would love to see him do really well. I really would.
I think that's like everybody's approach with it. From like every Australian is like, come on, man. Like, we just want to see you do well. Like, that's all that we sort of care about, right? And before I let you go, I mean, just real quick, pick for the NBL title. Who have you got?
I really do think it's close, but I'm going to go with Illawarra. I think they've got the best balance. I'd love to see them win. I like their story. Small cap team coming in, they've built something. They haven't gone and spent a whole lot of money to be able to recruit a whole lot of different people. They've kept a core that didn't win, and they've been able to get it done. I love Lockie Ulbrich too. We haven't mentioned him, but this kid's an NBA player. There is no doubt about it. He's not getting a whole lot of opportunities at the moment, but everything, his motor, you can't teach big guys to play with that sort of motor and his athleticism and everything else. He's a real kid to watch out for. I think he's a future boomer. He's going to have a great career.
One of the great NBL mustaches as well. Very simply. And I know that you're like, this is your time to really, sink your teeth into NBA for the back half of the season, the playoffs. Do you have any vibes on who you'd sort of like look towards the back end of the season to maybe have a crack? Like, can Boston go back to back? Do you like Cleveland? Do you think OKC have a shot? Who is your vibe for the NBA title?
I haven't watched enough of it. I really haven't this year. I think it's Boston's until someone can take it from them. But, from what I've seen, Cleveland, have been outstanding. There's no doubt about that. The West is going to be intriguing. I really hope that Steph can make a run. And whilst I don't think they can win it, they're going to get some momentum. There's no doubt about that. I think the Clippers are sort of a long shot based on all those things we spoke about before. I'm not a James Harden fan, but I think they've got some really good pieces. They actually play some defense. So I think that's going to be intriguing. But I reckon I'll have a little bit better idea in the next month, because I'm about to dig in and watch some serious amount of NBA.
I love it, because I think, isn't your thing always calling him James Harden because there's no D?
Harden. Yeah. No D. No D. But the good thing is he's surrounded himself with D. Yep. So he's still Harden, and he can score, but he's got D around him.
Yeah, he's got Kawhi. Kawhi and his giant hands are next to him. He doesn't have to do anything. It's awesome. What a great position to be in. Perfect. I love that. Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic, Shane. Thank you so much for jumping back on NBA Straya. 700+ episodes on from the last time we actually had you on, which is crazy. But thanks heaps. This has been awesome.
Congrats on 1,200 or so episodes too. That's amazing longevity, and nice to be back. Hopefully I'm speaking to you before another 500.
All right. And there you go. How good was that? That was a wicked. I just love having Hammer on. I'm just like, geez, can you tell? I'm just like geeking out the entire time. Just going, this is fun. I didn't even ask him about the Geelong Supercats. There's always next time. Either way, that's it for today's show. We'll be back on deck for Thursday, I reckon. Maybe. That's still a hard maybe, actually, the Thursday show. There is only one game tomorrow, so I might just not bother. That's the Hornets-Lakers game. I think we already tipped the Lakers because the Hornets are horrible. Despite having LaMelo and Mark Williams back, I'm still just, no dice. But either way, there you go. That was a great chat. Thanks massively to Shane Hill, all-time legend. Love having him on. Recurring guest, friend of the program. But make sure you're following NBA Straya on Twitter, Facebook, IG, YouTube, and TikTok. All the good stuff right there. Chuck us a rating, review on your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, YouTube, whatever app you're using, the Android phone. Get all the way around and get around all the other shows that we've got. The Cricket Today podcast, AFL Today, Hold All Tickets, NFL Straya. They're all very good, probably. You tell me. I'm here for the feedback. Let me know. Go, geez, Jim, these are horrible. It's like, whoops. I've completely cooked it, he says. Anyway, big thanks always go to From Oslo for the intro and outro song, as well as House Hats, Joshua Delaretta's Fascinating Gold Mines, Ramshackle Army, Iowa, Sextra, Green, and Dozers. And mind all the tunes you always hear in NBA Straya. So smash them all on Apple Music, Spotify. Follow them on all your platforms, all that good stuff. NBA Straya, Support Australian band, so should you. And that's it. We will catch you probably Friday. I think we've got another guest for that show, which will be very, very fun. So strap in. We'll also be doing some little format changes, I reckon. So just keep an eye on that. We've taken some feedback from the listeners. And I'm like, all right, I'm trying to do less work. Let's do this. So we'll see what happens. All right. That's it. We'll catch you probably Friday, you dickheads. This is NBA Australia saying, look after yourselves, would ya? And little Hosanna!